Hi, I'm Brandon Powell, and this is Why It Matters. And today we're going to be talking about vices. What are they, and what should we be doing about them? So, there's a devotional book that I absolutely love, and it's called The Imitation of Christ. It was written in around the 1420s by a German priest named Thomas Aquinas. And I just love this book. It really just challenges me on a deep level, partly because it focuses on human nature. And human nature is the same generation after generation after generation. So, though some of our circumstances will change and the challenges that we deal with are different from generation to generation, the weaknesses of our own hearts and minds, the sinful desires that we have, and the call of God upon our life is the same for every single human being throughout the entire history of mankind. So I just love this book. It really challenges me, and it really kind of hits you right in the mouth. So it doesn't kind of hold back its punches. It doesn't sugarcoat things. It really kind of just hits you. So I want to read something from this book for you real quick. If we could manage to eradicate one of our faults every year, how soon it would make perfect men of us. As things are, it is just the other way around. We often feel that our lives were better and more free from taint when we first turned to God than they are now, after all of these years spent in religion. Our eagerness, our sense of achievement, ought to be growing intenser every day. And here we are treating it as something remarkable when some poor remains of that early enthusiasm are still left to us. If we could only put constraint on ourselves just a little at the very beginning, the rest would follow simply and cheerfully enough. Oh, it is not easy saying goodbye to the ways that we have got accustomed to, but it is much easier than a frontal attack on the will. And if you cannot win the day in light skirmishes, what success can you expect when it comes to the really difficult part? You must begin by saying no to your inclinations, getting out of bad habits, or they will involve you in worse trouble as time goes on. So, what does this mean? Depending on your career, you might have gotten some advice at some point about trying to develop a new skill every year or get a new certification that opens up a new path on your career progression. Or if you're talking to a financial advisor, maybe you've gotten some advice about trying to grow your portfolio by this amount every year or gain this amount of percentage in interest back every year. Oftentimes, the advice that we get in this world is about improving the goods that we already have, the wealth that we already have, the strengths that we already have every single year. But from a spiritual perspective, we need to focus on eliminating our vices. I love that line in The Imitation of Christ that says, if we could manage to eradicate one of our faults every year, how soon it would make perfect men of us. You see, if you're like me and you have a lot of faults, it can be overwhelming if you're going to look at all of the faults that you have, all of the vices that you have, and just try to figure out how am I going to take care of all of these. It's overwhelming. There's too many of them. But if we focus on eliminating just one of them every year, we're going to make significant progress towards becoming better people. And for me as a man, I want to be a better son. I want to be a better brother. I want to be a better husband and father. I want to be a better worker. I want to be a better Christian. So whatever role you have in your life, if you could eliminate one vice out of your life every year, you would make so much progress towards becoming the person that God is calling you to be. So how do we do this? Well, the first thing there has to be is awareness. We cannot work on our flaws, our faults, and our vices unless we're willing to take a look at our lives and see where we are falling short. Second, we have to have acceptance. I don't mean accepting ourselves as we are. We have to accept that vices are vices, faults are faults. We have to be willing to look at things and say, that's not just a simple mistake. That is a vice that I'm struggling with. We need to accept the terrible reality of our weaknesses rather than trying to gloss over them or sugarcoat them so that we feel better about it. Remember, Just because something is normal or natural doesn't mean that it is moral. We need to make sure that we're not sitting there and excusing ourselves because we say this is natural, this is normal, but that still doesn't make it moral. Lying is natural. If you've ever seen a kid, kids lie. Lying is natural. That doesn't make it right. So we have to be willing to name vices for what they are. Vices. So what is a vice? Catholic Answers has a great answer on this. It's from the Catholic Encyclopedia, actually. It says that a vice is regarded as a habit inclining one to sin. It is the product of repeated sinful acts of a given kind, and when it is formed, in some sense, it is also their cause. Thomas Aquinas talks about how even though sin can be removed by God, the vice or the inclination to sin remains. And he says specifically, the longer an evil lasts, the worse it is. Now, a vicious habit is more lasting than vicious acts that pass forthwith. Therefore, a vicious habit is worse than a vicious act. In other words, the habit or inclination of doing bad things is going to last longer than just the simple act. Kind of like if you have a habit of lying, that habit lasts a lot longer than the single act of lying, right? That's that one time that you lied. That's not the problem as much as it is the pattern of lying. If you cheat on a test once, that's not as big of the problem as the fact that you have a pattern of cheating on tests or lying to your boss or cheating on your taxes or stealing from others or treating others as objects, whatever. It's usually a pattern. And that pattern is so much stronger and so much worse than the single act that we do wrong. So if we're only trying to address the individual choices or the individual bad things that we've done, we're going to have a lot more difficult time succeeding. In fact, we're going to fail if we do not address the inclination to make those choices. So the first thing we have to do is become aware of our flaws and our vices. And the second thing we have to do is accept that those vices are vices, that those sins are sins. Then the third thing we have to do is to be willing to attack those vices. Little by little, we need to be willing to be faithful in the little things so that we can be victorious in great things. Think again about what the saint said. If you cannot win the day in light skirmishes, what success can you expect when it comes to the really difficult part? Jesus says something very similar in Luke 16:10. Whoever is faithful in very little is faithful also in much. Whoever is dishonest in a very little is dishonest also in much. We don't address those things which seem little. Each vice by itself seems little. Each bad choice we make seems little, but it is a pattern that is driving us to become people we don't want to be and people God doesn't want us to be. So as you're doing your life goals, your vision boards, or coming up with a plan for your life, as much as career goals and financial security and those things are very important, make a plan for fighting against the vices in your life and becoming the man or the woman that God wants you to be. I'm Brandon Powell. This is Why It Matters, and thanks for watching.